Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and video show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, and experience from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe so you won't miss a new episode. I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm delighted and privileged to have a conversation with Richard Foster-Fletcher. Hey, Richard, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Richard, I'm going to introduce you to our audience. And in my homework, when I read up on your background, you claim to have, you're passionate about connecting the dots on what it takes to use artificial intelligence and other frontier technologies to create a more sustainable, ethical, and inclusive future. That I understand that, given also you're the executive chair of mkai.org, a podcast show. You have a background in IT, you used to work for Oracle, but also in media, BBC. In your daytime, that's your daytime job. You also are a volunteer for one of the UN agencies. You have an education, and that's what I find also quite interesting. You have an education in AI, data science ethics, but also in music theory and composition. So quite a multi-background. To begin with, the background in IT and media, somehow that seems like the right background to have if you want to do a podcast. Is that in your case?
Yeah. I think it was Tim Ferriss who said, just get really good at communication.
Yeah.
And you'll be head and shoulders above everybody else. Now, I don't want to be head and shoulders above everybody else. That's not the expression I like. Yeah. But when you want to stand apart, the ability to be able to articulate what you want to say is a skill that we all have to learn. Very few people have it from the start.
Okay, now it's MKAI. We understand the AI, artificial intelligence, but what does MK mean in this case?
Yeah, sure, well, humble beginnings. It stood for Milton Keynes, where we began. Look, I've always thought man makes plans and God laughs. And I think I'm no different. So we started a meetup where there wasn't one in Milton Keynes. It's a city in the UK that had a growing interest in technologies and AI. And I started a very clever startup called Neural Path for it that I thought everybody would be impressed by. Well, no one cared about that. Everybody loved the meetup. Anyway, COVID hit us. We went online. We built this global community. And then a few years ago, we realized with 108 different countries represented across our contributors and community of about 1,000 people, we ought to update our name. And we don't forget our roots, of course, but we're now called Morality and Knowledge in Artificial Intelligence.
Aha, so you keep the MK, but you switched its meaning. Yeah, that's smart.
Well, we did keep the MK because, of course, we had the website and that's what we were known as. But it was very interesting because there's a part of us that wanted to have ethics in our name, but we couldn't have that. We had to have an M, and that meant morality. Yeah. But somehow we realized that actually this sort of moral element was more us anyway than ethics. And when we want to work across all these different countries and NGOs, charities, governments, it's not really about someone like me or even you, Fritz, and I have so much respect for what you do, coming in and saying, look, this is ethical AI. I think it just doesn't work when you go broad enough, but everybody's got a moral compass. Everybody's dealing with certain different challenges, go to countries, and the poverty can be a massive problem, in which case, let's just tweak that compass. Let's just look at slightly modifying that to make sense. Rather than saying, hey, look, here's an EU AI Act, and you guys should do this.
Yeah, you have to be very careful, especially if you have contribution from over 100 countries, then you're going to be mindful of the various cultures you're going to deal with. And one cannot impose its, let's say, ethics on another in this case. Or in any
Absolutely. Case. And not for 1 second should we ever think that here in the UK or anywhere else, if we are even making, inverted commas, the right decisions, the UN might say, yes, we agree with it. But why are we making the right decisions? And even if we are, we should not be judging anywhere else in the world for 1 second.
Okay, now you just mentioned that this podcast should show it's a happy accident. You came in there with something else, but the podcast stayed. What is your objective with the podcast? Who do you hope to reach, and when are you going to be happy?
Well, you mentioned my education before. So I did my bachelor's and then went on to some advanced qualifications, but I never did a master's. And about partway through the podcast, I ended up doing 250 odd episodes in one stint. And I did the maths and I thought, this took as many hours as a master's degree. I thought, this is kind of it. This is my education. But I learned through provocative type of learning. I think you do, Fritz, too. So you love to ask the questions and you love to really steer the conversation and take it into different places rather than being reactive in the way that you learn. So for people like us, the podcast is a fantastic way to learn. So that's first of all the greatest strength I think it did for me. It's then a wonderful place to build your network. Anybody starting out, I think, on their own, like I did in 2019, you want to get that network. You want to get access to the people that can make a difference to you. And that's a great way to do it. But it's got to be valuable for them in two respects. One, you want them to get heard, but that's quite hard. It's quite hard to get hundreds of thousands of listens for sure. But you can give them a really great experience. So you can really prepare and think about them and tap into their world and ask the very best questions that you can. So they come away and think, I've learned something about myself from that, half an hour, an hour. And I'm sure you've heard that, Fritz, before.
Oh, very much. And that also, I'll share with my philosophy, and that actually comes down to how I look at how to build a community, how to build a network. Very much focus on the content and the quality rather than the quantity. Because I don't really care if, to some extent, if there are 100 or 1,000 people in the room, if the people in the room make a very conscious choice, look, I'm here for a reason because I'm spending my time and I want to spend it listening to you for half an hour, and hopefully you can touch those people.
I think so. And I think anybody listening needs to keep that in mind. You have no idea what happens and the impact of the work that you do. You just never know. And one conversation we had, so MKAI has done maybe 100 different events, forums, and so on. And Fritz, you've been involved in them in the past. And we've had thousands of people who've come through our virtual doors, so to speak. And we have a certain way of speaking and doing things that we think is a little different to how you might converse in a corporation. Mm-hmm. And we have no idea how many people have been to one of our events, got into work the next day and thought, you know what, this isn't me anymore. This isn't how I want to spend my time. I want to do something different. I want an organization that thinks differently about people, equity, planet, and so on. And maybe that's never happened, or maybe it's just happened once, but we have no idea. But we do know that one of the greatest ways to get to people is just to hear people talking a different way and seeing the ripples of that as they start to talk a different way. And we'll never see that, but we know we're doing it.
Great. Well, does that mean that you have an agnostic position in the sense that you don't have a vision on the content? Is it just about, okay, as long as there's content which people are able to share? Or do you also have like a personal vision or an MKAI vision you want to bring into the discussion?
That's a great question. I think a little bit of both. I think we are very happy to live within some of the questions and have events where people share perspectives, but don't necessarily come to an answer, because in some cases there isn't an answer in life, but working through the questions is extremely valuable. On the other hand, I'm 40 years old. When I get to 50 or 60, there's certainly going to be a part of me that thinks, what did I actually do?
Yeah.
Lots of great conversations, but what can I put my finger on?
Yeah.
And I think the next phase for us is probably trying to get a little closer to some of those governments where we can. And we can talk more about it in this call, but we're building this diverse network of stakeholders, external stakeholders. Right.
Okay. And is it just governments, or who are the other stakeholders you need to reach out to?
Well, governments would be an interesting place to be. We certainly have worked with some of the local governments in the UK. We almost signed an MOU with one of the African countries at the top level, but didn't quite make it through because so many changes happen in these places, not just Africa, but across the world. So at the moment, we work a lot in education, which is a great fun space to be, working with universities around Europe particularly. And we've become strategic partners with a number of the UK college groups. So that's just 16 to 18. So really great age to be working with. But we don't just work with the students. We also train up the teaching staff, the leaders, and we work with the business community, because the colleges always have an objective, as you may not know, to support the business community with upskilling, particularly around digital age products and AI. So we do a lot of that. We started work with some of the NGOs as well. That's quite exciting. We think of them as potential stewards for AI.
Yeah.
That's very much about navigating at the moment, comprehension, a bit like the moral compass that I was talking about before. And not so much in the corporate sector. I think we're spending our time a
Is
lot
that
in.
a deliberate choice, or hasn't that something has that not yet happened or not?
Truthfully, and I hope that's okay for me to
Yeah.
just speak from the heart here, there's two aspects. One, I think we live even now in an age where planet and people are still sitting far behind profit for organizations in the commercial sector. Not all of them, lots of brilliant companies, lots of B Corps, but if we took the general sector, I think it's hard to communicate in the same way at the moment. And then second to that, we obviously we want to create the impact. We want to be where we can make a difference. And I guess we want to walk the talk, and we believe that, the contemplation and the risks and the harms and the biases is as important as the innovation. And you get that in education. They absolutely want to innovate, but they want to be extremely careful as well about their impact. So I guess it's just where you fit for now anyway.
Yeah. And is this these age group? So that's still high school level, if I understand correctly, 16, 18 years old.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. So some schools go all the way up to 18, some don't. And then this is the exclusive sector just for 16 to 18 in the colleges where you don't wear a uniform, a lot of vocational courses. Lots of people go there and they study great subjects, but you'll also find a lot of people going into vocational industries like mechanics and hairdressers and people like that.
Okay. And what's your experience in talking to these or dealing with these 16, 18-year-old? Are they focused on the technology, what it can do? Are they indeed focused on the ethical side of the discussion? What makes them tick?
Well, they're hugely impressive, first of all. And when I meet them, I think back, as I say, I'm 40, so we're going back 24 years when I was their age. And my father bought me Encyclopedia Britannica on a DVD. And this was about £800 for this DVD was. And a long time ago, right? So this was very expensive. He was very generous. And I think we had Encarta as well. But that was it, right? And now you look at the tools they have available. I think to some extent, we can see different social nuances coming out of our younger generation. I'm not an expert on that, but I think there's many, many good articles on that. They are definitely more conscientious, which is exciting. But beyond that, for me, just leveling up, you think about the massive complex challenges we have in the world and the sophistication we need to meet those. And giving young people these kind of tools is a great way in 20 to 30 years from now, having the people that can actually deliver on this.
Do you feel that they recognize that people are, that generation is aware of the tools they have at their disposal?
I don't know, actually. One recent poll I saw, informal poll at the 16-year-old level, asked how many were using ChatGPT, and about 40% of the students across a year group, I think, said they were. And then they asked how many people are using My AI in Snapchat, and almost everybody put their hand up. And it's actually powered by OpenAI, so it's in effect the same application. In Snapchat, very popular, obviously, with the younger people. It's mandatory. You can't get rid of My AI. I don't know if you've seen it, perhaps. So it's there on your screen. So I think it's pervasive, and it's slightly opportunistic from Snap, but it's absolutely getting used. But my opinion, I don't think so. I think they sort of see it as more of a buddy, and they don't necessarily see the V8 supercharged engine that's available for what they could do in terms of academia and even building businesses right now. And
when you look at that age group, are you optimistic, or are there any concerns or advice you want to give this group of people?
I didn't know you'd ask me so many questions about these younger people, and I'm only just sharing a few of my reflections.
Sorry.
I think
I'm just triggered with what you're telling me, but there's some.
I think COVID hit this group very hard for sure. It hit them at a really tough time, didn't it? In that mid-teens, early teens time. Sure. So I think there's a lot of work now to help that group socially. I'm generalizing, of course, but I think that support is needed. But I can't think of a better place to be working than shaping at that level.
Well, I'm going to move on to another question, because given what you're doing right now, I understand your education, AI, data science, ethics. I was wondering, because you originally started with music theory and composition, is that like long gone, completely oblivious, or is that still something? Is that an education which brought you something which you're still using today?
I had a funny thought the other day, actually, because I used to love my music composition. I'd be on the piano. We had a Bechstein Grand in the front
Nice.
room. I know, how nice, right? And I was on it all day, and I started composing, and I was very lucky to get access to a recording studio in those younger years. Look, we weren't rich. I'm making maybe sounding like we were rich, but we were just careful with our money, and my parents were very generous to pursuits that would give us opportunities later in life. I don't even think we had a TV for many years, so we certainly weren't blowing a lot of money around. And so I did that, and I took one of my compositions to my then piano teacher, a young guy in his 20s, and he turned his nose up at it, and he said it was very poor, and it really turned me off composing.
Yeah.
And I was walking about 2 months ago, and I thought he was lying. Wait a minute, I see now that I think he was jealous, and it's taken me 20 something years. So, wait a minute. Yes, it's the reason I mention it is that the harm that some words can do, right?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
Look, I didn't practice hard enough to be a musician. I was never going to be a musician. It's a great love. I tried acting. I wasn't good enough at acting. But then I started public speaking, and I thought, I found the thing that I love doing. So it took me there.
But you also point something out, which is very relevant for this podcast, The Brand Called You, is that the people we interview are role models, and we imply that these are people relevant to listen to their advice. It's one of the questions you always ask people: what's your advice to young managers starting their own journey? But what you're actually sharing might be just as relevant. Sometimes you have to ignore the advice, the feedback, the statement, because the reason you're getting that might not be the real reason that was given.
Sure. Look at anyone's parents, Fritz. Yeah. They don't want you to be that successful. I promise you they don't, because that carries risk. They want you to be happy, and they want you to be reasonably successful without taking any risks. So listen to them for sure, but they don't want you to go here to this scary place, right?
Okay, yeah, that's something to think about. Okay, so that experience, does that now encourage you to give people advice, or does it actually hold you back?
I don't like to give advice for sure. I think the world changes so quickly. You absolutely do not know what it's like to wear somebody else's shoes. And I think even as we look back in history to the terrible things that have been done, we don't condone them, but we think, would I have done anything different? Really? What's in me that makes me think I'm somehow better than that? And we're so lucky. I'm so lucky to be able to do this kind of work. It's a great gift. But that said, I think I gave one piece of advice to some PhDs at Glasgow University, and they never invited me back again to speak. And I just said, kind of, don't worry. There's so many paths that will take you in the general direction of what you'll want, that the doors just keep opening. No, and they said, no, they must do their PhDs and blah, blah. I said, yeah, maybe. I said, there's many paths.
No, I get your point about not being able to step in somebody else's shoes. So I understand your point you're making about giving advice in these times which change so much. Let's tweak that and say, share your experience. Just share what you have gone through. And I would like to ask you, what are the biggest learnings in your life? You say, look, I've made a mistake, but this is how I conquered it, and this is the lessons learned I got from that. And so, A, could you please share? Do you want to share something? And B, do you believe it's worthwhile to share that experience?
The one that stands out for me, and it won't be relevant for everybody, is I think I've stayed in things too long. Mm-hmm. I think I've stayed in friendships too long. I think I've stayed in relationships too long. And I think I've stayed in jobs too long. And the reason that you stay in those things is what's called the sunk cost fallacy. You've actually invested so much of your time and energy in something. And I left Oracle after 5 years. That isn't one of the examples actually I had in mind, but it takes so long to learn all of the inner workings of Oracle that have no value outside Oracle at all, that you don't want to throw it away. And I went into a company, I learned all about workforce management over like 4 years. It was, such deep knowledge. And I think you've got to be willing to throw that away in a business career. Not if you're a lawyer or a doctor, but in a general business career, I think you've got to be quicker to say, I need to learn something else now. I need to push myself out of this comfort zone. And I need to do 2 to 3 years, not 4 to 5 years. That's what I've learned. It won't be relevant for everybody, but that's the mistake I made.
Okay. And was this a gut feeling nudging you, saying, look, hey, you might want to, Richard, you might want to move on? Or was it something you could only experience in hindsight? So can you learn, are there signals out there which would allow you to make these decisions earlier than you did?
Yeah, I think same for everybody. It's just building confidence. It's imposter syndrome. And I think, you read these, job specs, and they're intimidating sometimes. And I think this is a problem as well for some of the genders, isn't it? That you think, oh, I don't have enough experience in these areas. But, it's a wish list, really.
But that's also then, I think, the advice I would give people. It's indeed, as you mentioned, a wish list. They're trying to get somebody who is impossible to get, and let's just see how somebody would react on that impossible wish list.
Yeah, and some people say fake it till you make it, and some people say don't do that. But that's just an expression. But living with some confidence and belief about who you are, that's not faking it till you make it.
Yeah.
That's knowing your inner value.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of young people can look at themselves and say, I'm going to be fantastic in 10 years from now or 20 years. I know I am. I'm going to have huge value. So why don't I just start believing that now? If I know that, I can live that. Not arrogance, humility, in fact, but belief.
Belief, knowing you're not there yet, but you're going to get there.
Oh. Tenacity. You will. So why not just start to live it?
Yeah. Is there anything where you draw get your inspiration from? What you say, hey, this is actually helping me?
I mean, yeah, I read a lot of books. If we're talking about history and career here, when I hit about 25, I just, every business book I get my hands on, vivacious, just, tens a month to get through them. So I think you've got to learn it, whether you want to do an MBA or read the books. You've got to know how business ticks, I think. You can break the rules, but you probably want to know the rules. I wish I'd learned more about finance when I was younger. I wish I'd studied harder to understand how the world ticks and works in terms of investments. Still time to do that, but it's one of my regrets. Yeah. And inspiration, I'm blessed for it. I get to talk to people like you on a daily basis from all around the world. It has transformed me as a human being. And I meet people now who still are sort of have stereotypes, there's, even sort of racism, all these kind of things. And it's just so far away, because when you talk to people from all over the world every single day, you just do not notice what color their skin is. It literally doesn't register. You just see that, you start to really see that person and see the brilliance in them. And that's humbling in every sense, that they would want to spend time with you. And it pushes me to be a better leader, to be more humble, to be more gentle, not to grasp at life, let good things come in when they're ready, really, and be willing to take steps back or steps to the side, and not just be on this ruthless pursuit of me, and to trust.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Richard, by the way. I was wondering, how can you get everybody to you could say, get that opportunity? What I'm thinking of, you are in a position where you have an excuse to talk to the whole world. You can reach out to anybody out there and say, look, hey, I'd like to have you on the show because it's a global show. So you've created an opportunity for yourself, allowing you to talk to all those great individuals out there. What do you say to people who say, well, I don't have what you have, so I can't do that?
Well, everybody's circumstances are different, for sure. I think you've got to try and make the most of what you do have. I wasn't sure whether to join Oracle or not. I had a great time there, but now forever it's on my CV. And I think when people decide if they want to speak to you or me or anybody else, they're going to glance at your, probably in our case, LinkedIn profile, and they're going to look for some buzzwords on there. So I think anybody can go through and really look at that and think, okay, I'm now looking at it from, this person's perspective. What do they want to see? And what's going to lean them towards a yes or a no when I ask them for this conversation? Nobody's really ever asked me about listener or viewer numbers. Very few people ask me how many people will attend our forums before they agree to speak with them. So I think what was it then that they liked? I think there's got to be enough on there on your CV for them to do something, and you can do some courses or get some referrals or whatever, just, have it on there. But then if you can make them feel special, then that starts to unlock the magic. I think Dale Carnegie said that, didn't he? He said, be interested rather than interesting. And if you help enough people get what they want, you can have what you want. I think that was Zig Ziglar, going back to my 20-somethings again here.
Yeah, you're quoting a lot of books you've read, and these are good, excellent quotes, by the way.
And so I think, when I met you back in the day, Fritz, it really was, when Fritz meets me, how does he come away and think, I really enjoyed that time. I felt needed. I felt noticed. I felt loved. I felt special by this man. Because those are some base core human feelings that any of us can give to anybody else if we care enough and if we want to enough.
And that's actually advice you could give actually to anybody, regardless of which age or experience people have, is indeed listen to other people. And if you listen to other people, you'll get noticed as well. Yes.
Listen, and I think that I hadn't really thought about it, but that's probably where we've worked the hardest as a team. And if you start a business, what is it? 4 out of 5 go bust or something for it. It's a crazy number.
Yeah.
And people go onto calls, they think about how to win them over or persuade them or sell to them or get them to partner and so on. But I think if you can just trust and flip that around and just think, I want this person to feel like they're the most special person in the world. At first, it might seem a bit silly. You might feel that you're being faking or sarcastic, but I promise you, over time, it just becomes natural. And you genuinely do want this person to feel like they're the most special in the world. And when they tell you something, you can start just to lean into it. Well, why, Fritz? Why did you go down this path? Or how did you get there? What inspired you to get there? And really listen. I mean, you must have felt some of this in the past with your interviews, Fritz.
Oh, yes. No, I very much recognize being able to do interviews has turned me into like a sponge of knowledge of all these great people I've been interviewed. So I feel blessed with the opportunity just to be able to reach out to people, say, do you want to have a talk? And so in itself, this is like a microcosmos, which if you, I would say, take that into the real world, I'm realizing I'm taking the same principles on board in any normal situation I do. And I find myself quoting a lot an acronym I picked up a couple of years ago. It's an American acronym called HAIL. As like an attitude you can have. And HAIL stands for honesty, authenticity, integrity, and love. So just be honest about what you do, be authentic, be integer, so don't lie, and enjoy what you do, love it. And that's a very easy way I've noticed just to reach out to people. And then over time, you'll find your place in the context of what you can do for other people.
Could you say the 4 again? Honesty,
authenticity, integrity, and love.
That's brilliant. It's beautiful. Can't say it any better.
Hey, thank you. Hey, Richard, a couple of final questions for you because time is running so fast now. And that is, what does success mean for you?
Freedom. Freedom to choose how I spend my day and who I spend time with. I think that's been the main driver.
Okay.
And that's difficult because then you wrestle with, to what extent do you want to go up to other levels when it's going to bring in more stress, more time, more clients calling you at midnight, hey, Richard, this isn't working. I need this. Asking questions to yourself like, when is it enough?
So getting calls from business contacts in the middle of the night, I mean, it has happened before, not something it should not be your day-to-day life 24/7. What does that mean to you? What does it do to you when you get in that situation?
I think COVID's changed all of us, and I think it's changed my relationship with the world somewhat. And I think not going out to so many meetings as we haven't done over the last few years has made me to be more selective about how I would spend my time and who I'd spend it with. Like you said earlier, the quality rather than the quantity. I've focused more on me, on my mental health. I think in business, my mental health has always been very, very good, but sometimes outside of it, like any of us, we're wrestling with families and love and these sort of things. I think it's quite difficult out there in the world these days in relationships for anybody who's like me and trying to find the right one. And so with ChatGPT and a great team, I've freed up a couple of hours a day, weekdays now. So I do an hour of meditation and yoga with an instructor from North India who I met in person. And I do an hour of fitness, so weight training. I'm very fortunate again. I've got a small house, but I've got one of the rooms as a gym. Mm-hmm. And so we go in there and we train hard. And, these guys, not only do they, help me improve my physical well-being, they're actually terrific guys who just, flow the confidence and positivity and love into my life, a little bit like your HAIL acronym. And that's transformed my life. And look, we can all work hard. Any of us can just work hard, but I think that's pointless if you get to your 30, your 40, 50, or 60, and you haven't got your physical and mental health. Then for what?
I think that's a very relevant and important point to make for people in their young career. It's that, like, hey, taking care of yourself is almost like that is number one. And this is not stepping out of the rat race. This is actually allowing you to be part of the rat race almost, because don't burn yourself down. Because you're going to work for at least 40, 50 years in your lifetime. So it's a marathon.
I think so. I think it's tough when you've got a big job. Met a guy who's heading up AI in the UK for EY. It's a tough job, right? Long hours. But I think if you do your own thing, you have got that choice and you can work every hour of every day. And I think you probably need to, but not forever.
Yeah.
For the first year or two, do it. But after that, you shouldn't be doing it anymore.
So is MKAI for you like the last stop, or do you see yourself doing something else in the future?
Well, I said I'd give 10 years to the world's causes. I don't think you can fight forever around climate change, equity, those sort of things. So I'd like to build a second part of the business over the next few years, something that maybe could be acquired. So I think I've got to build some wealth as well as doing the full good that we do as well. Otherwise, I think I might regret it in 10 years if I don't. So I'd like to have something that I could sell in maybe 2031. And in between, I'd like to do as much good as possible. And then I think a gear change, and it might be back into the arts for me after that, into the creative world again. I'd love to have the time to study philosophy and theology in some great detail. So maybe some lecturing awaits. I'm excited, really. Whatever it'll be fun. But I need to be able to let go at some point as well of all this.
Maybe that's one of the most important lessons to share is, doesn't matter what you're going to do, it has to be fun.
It does. You've absolutely got to enjoy this.
Great. Well, hey, Richard, I really enjoyed talking to you today for the brand called You. You've given us some very valuable lessons and also share with what you're doing, how you got there with MKAI. Happy accident, serendipity, but you've been able to prove and show how great serendipity can be and what it can lead to. So thank you so much.
Rich, you're one of my heroes. I love what you do, and I'm always cheering you on.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.